So today I'm going to talk about duct detectors. And before we get into the switching and relays of the conventional duct detectors, I'm going to talk about the ones we might be a little more familiar with, the ones we actually install. This here is a system sensor DNR housing. Chances are you've probably installed one, you've seen it, you've wired it, you're more or less familiar with it. But I'm going to go through it anyways. It'll only take a couple minutes, then we'll get more into the switching and electrical technical side of it. So to start with the simplest, where the SLC of this one wires up, that's our data communication. We have this positive N terminal. That's also the communication positive. You see there's this yellow wire here, and it's this screw right here. That's going to be your red wire of your SLC. And where this black lead comes over, that's your negative or communication negative. So you'll go with the yellow and the black there. That's where you'll wire your SLC. You'll put your smoke detector head here. This works with the older type smoke detector heads like this that have been recently replaced by System Sensor. And it also works with the new white series, whether it's an ivory head or a white head. They are both UL listed and compatible with this duct detector housing. Now, to be kind of on topic with our switching, right over here, we have this terminal. This yellow wire is the same yellow wire over here. That's your positive SLC. And the reason it goes through this switch before landing on your positive terminal is so that when you remove the clear cover, the housing that covers this, the switch here opens up, essentially turning off SLC to the smoke head, so that if the housing isn't secured on correctly, it's going to give us a trouble on our panel, because what that housing does is it actually directs the airflow coming out of the sampling tube across the smoke detector head and then back into the vent, creating an actual air sampling with the right rate and the right flow and everything. But if that head is not attached and air is able to leak out, then that smoke might go somewhere else and the device might not detect it correctly. So they put this tamper switch on there. And what happens is when you put the clear cover over this, it pushes down on this switch and lets your panel go into normal condition. But if it's not seated correctly, this switch won't get pushed down and the air won't flow across it. So if you ever have a missing trouble on your duct detector head, you've gone up there, you've put your meter on your wire, you've got SLC here, you've checked, your head is addressed, it snapped all the way in, and you're not sure what's going on, you might not have that tight enough. You might not have your cover seated on there properly. The other thing with these is there are two screws back here. You see the silver one here, and there's normally another screw here, but I've taken it out because if you've got this in a weird position and maybe there's like a wall or something right here that you're trying to mount this and there's just not enough room, by pulling that screw out, you can actually pivot this down below. And so if you get some weird mounting requirements, this actually can be mounted this way or this way. And all that it takes is just moving that one screw. Then the last thing is actually a feature it took me a long time to find out existed. So I like to make sure everyone else out there knows that it's there. And that has to do with the addressable relays we associate with the duct detector. So if you're working in a school or somewhere that has mechanical rooms and there's a VFD mounted on the wall, it's really convenient to be able to take this relay and mount it right beside that VFD. So you only have to, 2 or 3 feet of shutdown wire and you're immediately there. But if you're in any other kind of environment that maybe you don't have a dedicated mechanical room, your unit's just above the ceiling or it's up on a rooftop, and you have to run your shutdown wire into the unit, it's really nice to not have to put up an extra back box by snapping off the tabs that are normally up here and down here. And I snapped them off earlier. I probably should have waited to show you in the video. This actually fits and mounts right inside here. And so you can mount that right there and you don't have to get extra 1900 boxes or deal with it. It just saves you a couple minutes and a little bit of effort. So I wanted to make sure everyone knows that, since I am talking about duct detectors. I thought this would be a quick and easy way to just make sure everyone sees that when you do mount a relay in a duct housing like this, you don't use the cover that comes with it. And to show you which cover I'm talking about, it's this one right here. You don't need to put this cover over it because you see it doesn't fit inside the housing. you just use the clear plastic cover that comes with the duct housing. And that'll completely cover all this area, and it meets all the UL and IFC requirements and everything else for covering your junction boxes and terminals and all that. So now with this relay, to remind you kind of what we talked about last week with that homemade switch I used and the lights and the battery, one of the examples I gave was talking about air handler shutdown. And we used the light to show when the light was on, the air conditioner unit was on. And the air conditioner or heater is something we typically want all the time. So you would want that always running, always turned on. And then when you went out of your resting state, you went into your alarm state, it then turns the unit off. We said to do that, you would use a normally closed contact with your common. A closed circuit is a circuit that is on, an open circuit is a circuit that is off. So here we actually have two sets of switches on here because we have a common one, normally closed one, and over here is normally open one. So these three terminals are one switch, and then these three terminals over here are a second switch. I don't know how in focus this is or isn't or easy to read, but then we have a common two, a normally closed two, and a normally open two. They're two separate switches, so if you use common two, you can't use normally closed one because they're two different things. You have to use common one for normally closed one or common two for normally closed two. And in the case of air handler shutdown, that's what you'll be using is that normally closed and that common, because we want the unit to be constantly running. So whether you're running your shutdown wire to a VFD, if you're running it directly to their unit where they've got some alarm supervision going on in the air handler unit itself instead of a separate VFD, or if you're having to do kind of the older way and break power to the thermostat wire, because turning that thermostat will also turn off the unit. In any of those cases, you'll use your normally closed. That way, whatever it is we're breaking power to can normally be turned on, and then we're turning it off. So everything we do with the other one is going to kind of be based on this principle. But I wanted to start with our addressable device that we deal with a little more often when we're putting in our own duct detectors. But these conventional ones have a tendency to become more confusing. So I'll have my meter over here as well. Let me see if I can get that over there. And so our meter will act like our alarm panel. We're going to be looking for three possible different switching positions. And it's the same three we're normally looking for. We're either going to be looking to see our end-of-line resistor, we're going to be looking to see an open condition or a shorted condition. And so, as always, I'll read what's on the meter screen in case you're not able to see it clearly. But before we do that, I'm going to go over the terminals we have here. So we have this whole top row of screws up here. We don't touch any of that. If we're using a duct detector like this, it'll be provided by the mechanical contractor, and all of these up here are for them. There's also this auxiliary A and auxiliary B. Again, we don't need those. Those are for them. All we're worried about is this SUP, which is your supervision. This watches the duct detector for trouble situations, like maybe it's power loss, maybe this cover's not seated on there correctly, the smoke detector head gets dirty, those kind of things. And then alarm. This is whenever the smoke detector head actually senses smoke flowing across it. And so I'll talk about both of these broken apart as two separate functions, then we'll talk about joining them together. And I'll start with the easier one. I'll start with the alarm. You see there's only two terminals here. We have common and normally open. Now when we're working with monitor modules and switches and that sort of thing, that it's open. That's all there is. Just like these leads aren't touching. When they touch, you see it go shorted. And so when I touch common and normally open, of course, they're open. So when this comes into play is when you're putting a resistor on something and you're trying to supervise that resistor for the circuit. If we get a open condition with a monitor module where we don't see anything at all, your fire alarm panel goes into a trouble. It may say open circuit, it may just say fault, but then it'll give the address and description of the monitor module. In this case, right now that I've added the resistor, you can see there's 46.05 k ohms. This is a 47 k ohm resistor. That's within spec of what the monitor module will be looking for. So in this case, it's going to read normal condition, because whenever it sees that 47 k ohms, or, you know, they're within the accepted tolerance range, so in this case 46 k ohms is fine, it's going to go in normal condition because it sees the resistor. It's not open, it's not shorted, this is how it should be, normal condition. And then what happens when smoke flows across this, it will then close, and what we would read would be a shorted condition. And so that would essentially be the same as me touching the same screw terminal where you see that 0.2 ohms. It would read that same way across these two screw terminals because there's an internal switch that would actually connect them. So I can kind of simulate that here by taking this wire and putting a jumper between them. And you'll see that even though there's a resistor there, the electricity is going to take that path of least resistance, and it's going to actually go across this red jumper I'm putting in with the resistor, and it's going to give us a short on our meter. And so that's going to simulate an alarm condition here. So you see, even though there's a resistor across there, I've got 0.1 ohms. That's reading across this because electricity is lazy. It's always going to take the path of least resistance to return to where it's coming from. And in this case, a bare wire going between the terminals is easier to get through than a resistor. So I'm going to take this back out, because that's what we should have pretty decent understanding of the alarm terminals. Like I said, that's the really simple side of this. There's only the common and normally open option. Nothing too terribly fancy there. But whenever it goes into that shorted condition, whenever your monitor module sees that short, that's when it triggers your alarm, or if it's programmed to a supervisory condition, which most of the time we'll be monitoring for supervisory. And only when the local AHJ tells us will we actually look for an alarm. Then we have this other one, the SUP. This is supervising for trouble conditions. As I mentioned before, it could be this cover over here not seated properly, so this switch won't be closed. It could be that the smoke detector head's not put all the way in. There could be a wiring problem here in this joint, not too terribly likely unless they just messed it up at the factory. It could be that you've lost power, which in the case of new construction sites, that I believe is going to be your most common problem, is that when you're going to wire this up, there's a lot of times your air handler unit won't be turned on yet. And that's going to have a great deal of effect with how these labels right here work. And so that's going to affect how our meter reads them and what signal comes on our panel. So there's what's called resting state and alarm state. I've been using that terminology the last couple lessons. Resting state is as this device sits here in my hand. It's not powered up. It's nothing about it has changed. It's not anything else. It's just resting. And so while it's in its resting state, you see we have common, normally open, and normally closed here. I think that's a little blurry. Let's see if it clears up. There we go. Okay. So the normally open one in resting state is going to be an open contact, and the normally closed one in resting state will be closed. It went blurry again. I don't know why the autofocus is giving us problems. But what that means for us is while it's turned off, we can take our meter and we can put one leg on common and one leg on normally closed. And we see that right now, this terminal is closed at 0.1 ohms. So I've got my short going between common and normally closed. So that's closed right now when it's turned off. And going over to normally open, it stays open. So we can see that while this unit is turned off, these labels are accurate. But what that means is as soon as we power this thing on, now it won't do it for me today because I don't have the right smoke detector head to go in here. And so I can't get it to actually flip and show you this. But that means that these are going to be not in their resting state while it's on, so that if it does lose power, that relay flip states and tells us that it's lost power. So if I want to supervise this, I can start by putting my resistor under common. That's going to be, no matter what side of the circuit you're using, you always use common. And then where this comes in is I have to decide, do I want to supervise it with normally open or normally closed? And because this is not powered on, there's a short between normally closed and common, which tells me that I actually want to put my resistor there. Because then when it powers up, it's going to switch away and it's going to open up. So right now, it's not powered. It's in trouble condition because it's turned off. If I put my meter here, I see that short. Even though there's a resistor across it, I see the short because it's in trouble. And so this would give me a supervisory signal at the panel. If I put it on the other side with the normally open contact and the resistor, right now it would give me a normal condition. But as soon as I powered this unit on, then it would flip and that side would short. All right, before I move on and start joining the two sides, is everyone with me? Does anyone have any questions? Whether it's about the function, what we're trying to do, how monitoring the resistor works, or am I good to go? Should I keep moving so we can get to the how we use one monitor module to supervise both functions? All right, I'm going to go ahead and keep moving. All right, so now, if we want to think about it this way, like we've been talking about, where we have to combine them, obviously I'm going to need to use the common of both sides so that I can use both switches. Because no matter what, when you use a switch, you always use the common terminal. So that's going to be one thing I have to take into account. Then I have to think about what I'm actually doing with my circuit. So the alarm, I'm obviously going to use normally open as the other side of it. But then I need to decide, am I using the normally closed or the normally open on my treble supervision? So if I think about it from the point of view of the monitor module, or in this case, the meter, I'm going to need to have my resistor across my common and normally open, because I know I have to watch for alarm. So if I start by just having that, where I would land the two legs, we'll say it's this wire right here. This is coming from our monitor module. And I land it exactly like this. Then I'm going to watch that alarm contact. And I'm not doing anything else yet, but this would be the right way to wire up the alarm contact. However, I need to include the treble supervision. So I'm actually going to use my resistor as a jumper so that it's both the supervision into line resistor and a jumper in the circuit. And I'm going to put it under the common terminal over here and the common terminal under alarm with one of the leads for my monitor module. By the way, in this case, the polarity doesn't matter whether I use positive or negative coming from here. Just because these switches are not polarity sensitive. There's not a positive or negative. So it doesn't matter if yellow or purple from your monitor module lands here, or in this case, red or black from the wire that would be coming from the monitor module. Now, the other thing we need to think about is how we're going to complete this circuit. Because right now, if I take my meter and I just go from red to black, I can't see that resistor at all. I'm going to have a fault condition. It's going to be in trouble. But if I go from here to here, from common to common, I can see that resistor. So going from this black wire, I'm going to touch the black wire on the other side, all the way to this side of the resistor. So my circuit is complete coming from my monitor module into this terminal and across the resistor. Where I'm losing my connection is between this red wire and the resistor. So I have to figure out what is it going to take to make those two touch. Now I could just do a jumper from here to here and go from this normally open to this common, and that would put me in normal condition, but I'm not actually supervising anything over here. I'm not using this switch. I'm just overcomplicating the way I could land that resistor together. So what I need to do is I need to figure out, okay, which terminal is going to normally give me connection to my resistor, and then I'm going to jumper that over to this red wire. So if I put it right here under my normally open terminal, and I jumper from there to there to this normally closed terminal, I screw those down. And I use this side of my wire because we're going to pretend that, you know, this is running back to the monitor module. And I check it. I see that I have 46K ohms. So that should be good. That puts my monitor module in its normal condition state. The problem is this is turned off right now. So if I do that and right now I wire it up and everything's normal condition, I'm going to think, yeah, everything's good. I can go home. And then when I come back to the job site and the air conditioner units are all getting turned on, and all of a sudden I'm going to start having all these trouble conditions pop up, all these faults or open circuits showing up on all my air handler units on the job site. Well, this is why. It's because this has been turned on. This switch has switched states, and I'm actually using the wrong terminal. So what I need to use is this normally open terminal, because I need to remember when this duct detector is turned off, it's actually a problem, because I need the duct detector to always be on so that it can always be monitoring for that smoke. So now I'll take my meter again, now that I've moved it over to my normally open terminal. And you see it says open. It's OL for overload or open line condition. So there's now no connection. I can't see this resistor. That's that condition that gives me the trouble condition. But with this turned off sitting here on the desk, it should be in trouble. And so that tells me that, yes, right now I'm going to hook it up and I'm going to have a trouble on my fire alarm panel. But as soon as they turn on their unit, it should clear. Did I lose anyone with that, or are y'all following me? All right, I see Daniel gave me a thumbs up on there. That's kind of cool. I didn't know you could give thumbs up like that. Okay. That's really the brunt of what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to just take one day to look at these conventional duct detectors, because they can get rather confusing. They can get, if you don't do them all the time especially, it's real easy to forget how to wire it up. So I hope I didn't confuse anyone by wiring it wrong the first time to show you why it was wrong. With this system sensor one specifically, I'll break this down real quick to show you how I have it wired. I have my wire coming from my monitor module on my alarm contacts, the common and normally open. I have my resistor jumpered from common to common, and I have this other jumper that's just a jumper going from normally open to normally open. I've always thought this was the most straightforward and simple way to understand this, just because common to common, normally open to normally open. It looks neat. It's the signal is rather easy to follow, because if you trace it as coming in on this red line, it comes in, hits this normally open terminal, follows the red wire over, hits this one. When everything's turned on, it'll then follow the internal switch over to common, come back across the resistor, and then go up the black negative leg back to my monitor module, which gives it that complete circuit running through the resistor. And so anytime you're doing anything with a monitor module, that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to give it a complete circuit through the switch, through the resistor, back to the monitor module, in a way that if it goes into trouble, it can open, and if it goes into alarm, it can short. We have some sprinkler stuff that we need to pick up, and we'll go through how to do this with sprinkler equipment too. And I think by the time we get through this, y'all are going to get tired of hearing about switches, because I hope for a lot of you it's going to start clicking in, and it's just going to realize it's all the same thing, and the parts just look a little different. So I'm going to beat this to death for a few weeks, just so that we can really try to have it nailed down. Switches like this are absolutely essential in our industry, so the better we can understand them, and the kind of the more boring they become, the better we become as technicians, because then we're not having to think about it. We just know it that good. Yeah, if y'all have any questions, I'm open to listening to them. And if y'all have suggestions for other weeks of things that you've seen that's confusing or you don't feel you fully understand, I love requests. I love knowing what y'all want to know.
Has anybody ever had to do the airflow across the duct detector from the sampling tubes?
I never have. I've seen the meters you're talking about using where it connects here and then it goes through the meter and connects to this other side and it actually measures the rate of airflow. I've never had to do that personally.
Okay, I didn't know if I figured it since some of the municipalities are making everybody hold their feet to the fire, that would be one of the things that they check. It's supposed to be tested, and when you install the duct detector, you're supposed to use the manometer to make sure your airflow is what it's supposed to be.
All right, now what happened if the air balancing guys don't balance that airflow right? Will it still hurt that machine?
Yeah, it that has nothing to do with the output as far as downstream. This is coming straight off the duct detector. It basically they're just making sure that the sampling tubes are facing the right way.
All right. Well, thank y'all for being here. If you don't have any more questions, y'all are free to go. I'll see y'all next week. I hope these are helpful and informative. And if they're not, let me know why. I'm all open to suggestions.
Anybody got any other suggestions?
All right. Well, y'all have a great week.